It's Marie Fleming here from the Optimum Health Clinic. I hope you can all hear me and see me properly. So in case you didn't, I don't know, some of you might have watched the live video last week from Alex, and he mentioned that I would be taking over today and just doing tonight's live. So my name's Marie, so I'm one of the psychology practitioners here at the Optimum Health Clinic. And today I'm going to be just talking a little bit about the mind and the body connection. So why is the mind and body connection so important in recovery? So we often hear, if you've been following this page and following any of our work at the clinic, you'll probably have heard quite a lot about this mind and body connection. So I think it's a nice topic just to kind of get a little bit more clarity around for anyone that doesn't quite sort of see how they connect and what the relevance is in recovery. So before I get into that, thank you for all of you that are showing up today. Nice to see you all. Before I get into that, I'll just give you a little bit of a brief background. So I appreciate I've just kind of come on Facebook Live today. None of you know who I am. It's usually Alex that does these great Facebook Lives. So just a bit of a background on me and where I've sort of come from. So as I said, my name's Marie, and I suffered with ME, chronic fatigue, for about 5 or 6 years. So my journey started back in sort of 2009, 2010, and I started to become kind of increasingly fatigued, kind of increasingly unwell, and I was in the mindset at the time of sort of just pushing through. So some of you listening to this will kind of identify with this kind of achiever pattern, this need to kind of push through and just keep on going. So there's a recovery story actually. I did an interview with Alex, so you should be able to find it if you scroll down this page, and it's also on Secrets to Recovery. So I won't go too much into the whole background because, as you all know, there's always so much to explain and share about what we've been through. So I'll just kind of give you the snippets and the highlights. So basically, I was working as a child protection lawyer for quite a few years, and I was just in this mentality of pushing, working really hard, not giving myself breaks, and not summarizing, just not looking after myself, neglecting my own needs. And coinciding with that, I was a single mother, and I had my daughter at the time, and she was kind of going through her own stuff. She had Asperger's syndrome, and there was a lot of family pressures, a lot of family kind of stuff going on. So there was a lot kind of for me to deal with. So in the end, I got very, very run down, very burnt out, and the way I was living just wasn't sustainable, really. It's probably the easiest way to summarize. So eventually I kind of hit this low point that something had to change. I wasn't making any progress, and I was just kind of going down. So that's when I discovered the Optimum Health Clinic. So I started out my journey as a patient with them, and I was very pleased to say that I found them by Googling kind of randomly, and I discovered them, and I became a patient of the clinic. And it was through working with them that I basically just learnt the tools, the techniques, the things that I needed to learn, and often the things I needed to unlearn in order to just kind of clear my system out and really get on the path to recovery. So to cut a very long story short, I kind of worked on recovery over a period of time. And in doing that, I just fell in love with the material, the tools, the techniques, the way it was starting to really impact my body and my system and my way of doing things. And in the end, I started training, and eventually it just led me to loving this stuff, being really passionate about transforming parts of our life and really living in a way that's sustainable. So that's when I eventually ended up joining the clinic. So I'm pleased to say that I made a full recovery, and I now have joined the psychology practitioner team. So I'm here today just to kind of fill in for Alex really today because he's away, and just to kind of share a little bit about just a topic, I suppose, that's very close to my heart from my recovery journey, and something that comes up so often with the people that we work with through the clinic. So it's this idea of, why is the mind and body connection so important in recovery? So the way we look at it, so kind of the way I'd sort of explain it is that there are two, if we look at sort of us as human beings, being there are two aspects to us. So one, look at the mind, and the other being the body. Now, typically the way we're raised, I think the way that we're even, we kind of approach things as a culture as well, is to kind of be very mind based. So if you think about it, we're looking at, we're taught at school to kind of achieve and succeed and to think about what we're going to do next, and a lot of mind based approaches. So in terms of recovery, if we're just coming to recovery from just the point of view of the mind, so for example, there are a lot of approaches out there that kind of focus around purely mind. So kind of things like positive thinking, things like mind over matter, certain CBT type approaches. Not to say that I'm not knocking CBT, I'm not knocking any approach actually, and we never do at the clinic, but it's the idea of, if you just, and actually just to say something on CBT, we use approaches of CBT, so we're not knocking any of that, but it's just, if we purely focus on recovery from the mind's perspective, it's really limited. And the reason is that what it's doing is that it's kind of totally disconnecting from what the body needs. So you could be kind of totally in your head and thinking positive thoughts and really focused on recovery and really focused on moving yourselves forward, things that I did for a really long time. And it's part of the picture. It definitely, there's a place for it, absolutely. But it's almost like, if you're just coming from a mind's perspective, we're missing a whole piece of the puzzle. And the way we kind of work from the clinic's point of view is that we're looking at these, these pieces of the puzzle. So if you're just looking from the mind, it's almost like you're neglecting what the body actually needs, because the body has its own intelligence. If we start to tune into the body, which is a lot of, it's a big chunk of the way that we work. It's not everything, but it's a big part of it. If we start tuning in to what the body really needs, then it makes a really, really big difference. So we're not coming at it from just a mind perspective, because there's so much more to us than just our minds. So that's kind of like where we're coming from. So if you flip it around, we could look at it from the other perspective. So alternatively, you could look at recovery, or anything really we do in life, just from the body's perspective. So if you look at that, if we're purely focused on physically what we're able to do, maybe we're looking at fatigue, and we're looking at perhaps kind of pacing type approaches. Again, not knocking pacing, it's just the approach. If we're purely looking at it from a physical point of view, what we're doing in that respect is actually ignoring the mental kind of internal patterns. So a really good example of this, and this is something that I totally did for a really long time, is this kind of idea of, we talk about this a lot through the clinic stuff, is kind of this tired and wired. So tired and wired is, imagine if your body is completely fatigued, it's like really wiped out, and your mind is on a completely different page and it's kind of going 100 miles an hour. If you're purely trying to work with the body and saying, right, I'm going to rest my body, I'm going to allow my body to just stop and breathe, you're ignoring the mental patterns that come in, often preventing us from doing that very thing. So you can often be in a situation where, you recognize that your body is depleted. You could be resting, you could be just acknowledging that, putting your feet up, watching something on TV in an effort to rest yourself. But if your mind is constantly on and you've got these patterns running, so some of these patterns that Alex has talked about a lot, sort of the achiever type patterns, the helper, the perfectionist, the things that are in the mind telling us that we need to do more. And we're kind of, it's almost like the mind and the body are just on separate pages. So it's almost like if we're only going towards the mind, or we're only going towards the body, and we tend to adopt one or the other, it's almost as if we're like in a massive conflict with ourselves. So as long as we're in conflict, our stress levels are kind of up here, because it doesn't feel supportive. It doesn't feel very healing to sort of be up here and stressed and kind of fighting our own mind and body connection. So the reason why this mind and body connection is so important, and we tend to talk a lot about it, is because we basically we just need both. We need to be working with both parts. And that is really often very key in moving forwards, getting unstuck and making this progress that we so desperately want to make. So just to give you an example, in my own journey, I was somebody who really identified with the achiever pattern that we talk about. It was really kind of pushing myself forwards, neglecting my own needs, really, really head-based. So I was somebody that was really, that kind of fast-paced, everything's buzzing up here, and you're kind of living from up here. And I didn't give any kind of any time or space to what I was actually feeling. So it's kind of like this disconnect, and this is kind of the best way I describe it, is this kind of living from the neck up, not really in my body, having no awareness of what I needed in the time. So the way we work as a clinic is to really approach healing from both aspects, because by kind of bringing in the connection between mind and body, that in itself really, really goes towards calming the nervous system down. So it's this idea that our body needs to be in more of a healing state than a stress state. So ultimately what we're doing is calming the nervous system down from both aspects. So from the mental point of view, the mind point of view, and also from the body. So it's just this idea, and you may have heard this before, you may have had kind of experiences yourself with it. But the reason I thought I'd just jump on here and kind of go over this, because it tends to come up so often in my work with people at the clinic and kind of in life in general, to be honest. It's this kind of point of really living from the point of mind and body, and the difference that makes in terms of moving ourselves forward. So if you've read anything about kind of anything we do at the clinic, it's all about finding these missing pieces, kind of what goes into the jigsaw puzzle for you, which aspect for you is missing, and it tends to be one or the other. So I'll just have a look and see if there's any questions. I just may not see all of them, so let me just bear with me and see if there's any questions, and I can quite happy to answer them. So Tony, what do you discover to be the reason for becoming ill? Viral or stress and exhaustion? Okay, good question. So I won't kind of get specific with you personally, Tony, because obviously I don't know much about you. So, but on a general scale, there are different reasons for people kind of tipping into illness. And this is one of the complexities of kind of these sets of illnesses, is because there isn't often one key piece. It's often a question of kind of unpicking for you what are the pieces that went in it for you. For a lot of people, they identify with a lot of stress, a lot of burnout. A lot of people identify with, recognizing that they had some sort of viral infection and were never quite the same again since that. But it's often a combination of a lot of things. So I remember, I had, in 2009, I had swine flu. So swine flu for me was the infection that really just knocked my immune system completely. I was never quite the same since. But in terms of the cause of what tipped me over into illness, it was probably part of the puzzle, but not the entire thing. So it's a really individual thing, and it's something that we'd kind of unpick with you because it's so unique. And I think that's where sometimes we hit limitations, because there's a lot of unknowns, about these sets of illnesses, and it's quite hard to sometimes get a clear answer. It's like, why am I ill? What's going on in my body? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? So hopefully, to answer your question, it can be a combination of factors that kind of basically your system gets overloaded for whatever reason, various pieces for you. And in the end, your body just kind of tips into dysfunction. It just doesn't kind of work in the healthy way that it should. And it needs to come back down from this kind of anxious stress state into the calmer state. So it's not that necessarily stress is the cause of it. It's just, even if you are someone who never had any stress in your life, just by having this illness itself, it brings a whole layer, doesn't it, of stress, anxiety, uncertainty. So we're kind of looking at all the different pieces. So hopefully that will give you a bit of a guide, but it's hard to say kind of without looking at sort of individual cases. So let's have a look and see if there's any questions. So Hillary, how do you get the mind to shut up? Yeah, so that's the question, isn't it, Hillary? So yeah, so it's kind of starting to work with the noise that goes up there. So it's one of the kind, it's like a work in progress type of thing. There's no quick fix that kind of, we go from totally mind based to completely zen and calm and everything. So, it's a bit of a process. So it's one of the ways that we work with in the clinic, and it's kind of, this is where subtypes come in as well. It's like, if we, for example, if we can identify something like the achiever pattern or the perfectionist pattern, for example, or the helper type, there are going to be some sort of thoughts that come from those patterns. So it's almost, I'd always say the first step in getting the mind to shut up is kind of being conscious of what's there. Because often, if you don't know what's going on, it's really hard to work with it. So one of the first steps is kind of just starting to notice if, you are running certain thought patterns. What is going on in your mind? What kinds of things are you aware of? So it's kind of like, it's noticing what they are and then learning how to just kind of tune them out and turn the noise down. So it's one of the things that we absolutely cover here at the clinic, because it's so key to moving forwards and getting yourself out of that cycle, of kind of like, how do we get out of our minds? Because that's where we tend to live. So I hope that answers a little bit of, part of your question. It's just kind of becoming consciously aware of what's going on in the mind. So just let me know if that answers your question, if you've got any other questions, because I appreciate it can be quite hard to be specific with people, but it's just kind of, it's quite individual for each person. It's probably the best way of saying it. So yeah, so Tracy, brilliant subject, always trying to work on the mind body. Yeah, and it's like, it's an ongoing process, isn't it, Tracy? It's like, you can start the journey, and even with me, I've come out of the recovery stage, but it's always something that I'm aware of, this mind and body connection. And like I said, it's important for recovery, but I personally think it's a really great way to kind of anchor yourself in for life in general. So for me, even for me now, it's like, it's always something to come back to and keep practicing. And it's often a practice that we get to do. So let's have a look. Tony, round it out. Oh, okay. So Tony, so you're saying there's a lot of people around now with burnout and not necessarily ME, but simply just chronically fatigued. Yeah. I'm just weary that it's not primarily stress and exhaustion. Is it really treatable? Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. Yeah, so we talk a lot about stress and being exhausted. Sometimes it's related to that. Sometimes we're aware of that. There are times when we can be stressed and not really be aware of it as much, because we are almost so used to being stressed. So I'll give you an example. I'm not saying that you are stressed, I'm just giving it as an example. So going back to my experience, I remember when I was looking at my own stress response, I thought that I wasn't that stressed. I would have put myself kind of quite low down, a little bit stressed from work and things, maybe 3 or 4 out of 10. And it was only when I started calming my system down did I realise how stressed out my system was. But because we're in it, we often can't see it. Now, that's one aspect. It may be that stress for you and exhaustion isn't your piece, Tony. So it might be for certain people that there are other things that come into play. So in terms of, is it really treatable? We'd say as a clinic, we deal with so many different people from different backgrounds, different things going on. So if you imagine a jigsaw puzzle, for you, your pieces in your puzzle could be different to 10 other people with the same symptoms, but for you it's coming from a different place. So I think there are lots of different ways to work with it, and it's not always just about stress and just stress. There's a lot more to it than that, but it's just something that tends to come in quite a bit. So I hope that answers some of your question. Let's have a look. Tracy, yeah, indeed, it's a work in progress. Yeah, absolutely. So Tracy's saying, I definitely agree with that. I didn't think I was in a stress state until I went to the clinic. Yeah, you know, and that's really common because it's, you know, when we're not in the mind and body connection, we often can detach from what's going on. So it kind of comes back to what I was talking about earlier. You know, not everybody, but it can be where you sometimes don't know. Like, for example, if you're just coming from your head, for example, you might not feel the stress in your body. I didn't. I thought I was totally fine. In fact, my mantra was, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. You sometimes don't feel the stress in your body. You're almost not aware of the tension. Sometimes you're not aware of the emotional states that are bubbling underneath. All sorts of things we can be disconnected from. So often, you know, it can be challenging because we don't always know what we feel. On the flip side of that, sometimes we absolutely know. We're very clear it's not stress, it's other things in my life, and I can pinpoint, you know, it can be a very you know, it is a physical illness, of course, but it can come, we can be very clear that it comes from a different source. So it's not saying that it's all stress, and as long as we, you know, stop stressing, we're fine. There's a lot more to it than that, but it definitely, by getting our bodies out of stress into healing, makes a huge difference. And part of doing that is to connect our mind and body, because that's a huge part of recovery. So yeah, so and let's just check out if there's any other questions, and then I think we'll wrap up. So thank you for those of you that joined today, and thank you to anyone that watches the replay. So Alex will be back next week. I will be popping on again, I think sometime in March, so sometime in the next few weeks, so you'll probably see my face again pop up. So yeah, if there are any particular topics that you'd like us to cover, do let us know. You can just post below, because we'll go and check the comments later. So if there are any topics particularly you'd like to hear about, feel free to let us know, and we can come back to you on those and do a topic on those. So I think that's everything. Yeah, I can't see any other questions. So yeah, so thanks again for watching, and yeah, so Alex will be back again same time next week, around about this time. So yeah, and you'll kind of get that familiar face back again. So thanks for tuning in. I know that I'm kind of a new face to the clinic, so I'm, as I said, I'm one of the psychology practitioners here with an amazing team of other people also working with patients. So it's a real pleasure to be here and sharing some of my insights and part of my journey as well. So all I want to say, I suppose, is just to remember just to kind of look after yourself in as much of a way as you possibly can. And yeah, to just kind of keep doing the things that feel helpful to you, and to know, I suppose, to know that there are other people out there that understand. Because often we can feel like we're on this journey completely alone. And this is really, I think it's one of the great things about having a page here for the clinic and having these lives, and actually seeing other people comment and show up, because, you know, it kind of just reminds you that you're not alone. And there are other people that understand, and there are other people that have gone through this journey, and you're not alone, and there are ways to kind of work with what you're experiencing. So take care of yourself. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I will see you again soon. Alex will be back next week. Okay, take care. Bye.